All right, sounds like it's on. So we are going to get started because we have kind of a lot of information that we're going to try to cover, and I know that many of you in this room have been actively involved in our global partnerships, so we know that you know some background and maybe can share some memories and thoughts as well. So, what we're going to do is talk about both partnerships this morning, but we're going to give you a little background first because partnerships don't exist in a vacuum. We don't just decide, hey, we'd like to have a partnership with a church in Tanzania and then go do it. So it all comes from the ELCA, and there's one word we want you to remember, and that word is accompaniment. Some of you who have been on a Tanzania or an El Salvador trip have heard that word before. Does anyone want to try to give a working definition of accompaniment? Anyone who's been on a trip? This is a test. See what you remember. Leslie.
Walk alongside.
Walking alongside. That is the best short definition of accompaniment. So if you think about a traditional model of mission, we don't think about it as walking alongside. We think about it as taking our greater style of life and our greater knowledge set and our money and our Bible to improve other people's lives. So it's as if there's my story, and over there's your story, and there's God's story. So what side is God's story on?
Our side.
Ours, always, right? In that model. So it's like, we take God's story to these people. Well, guess what? Where is God's story?
Everywhere.
Everywhere, right? And sometimes we find that we are learning more from the people that we used to go to proselytize than they're probably learning from us, especially in matters of faith and spirituality. So the ELCA is very, very intentional about this idea of accompaniment and discarding that idea of mission, that we are going to walk together with people. And they use these words. So mutually is that it's together. There is no mission to, only with and among. Inclusively, which is focused on relationships. We seek to build relationships across divides, across misunderstandings, across cultures. Vulnerability, we don't have all the answers. So we all leave ourselves vulnerable to new experiences, to new relationships, and to being stretched outside of our comfort levels a little bit. Not just in terms of what kind of bathrooms they have or what kind of food you might eat, but in terms of a cultural norm or a way they interact with us or the way they live. It's being vulnerable to, well, maybe there's not one way, maybe there are multiple ways to live, and all of them have value. Empowering, we try to correct imbalances of power. So if you think of the old model of mission, who has the power? The bringers of the story, right? The bringers of the money. And often it becomes about money. It's about all this wealth that we have, and we're blessed to be a blessing. But often that money comes with strings, right? We bring it and we go, oh, this village could really use this. Here's the money for this project. And the villagers are going, well, we don't really want that. We would rather have this. But the old model of mission doesn't always listen to that. And then sustainability is also part of it. So we want to make sure that the churches that we're working with become sustainable and can last for generations, a long time. And we seek to do that by looking at relationships and working in community. So does this sound like an easy thing to do? It's easy to believe, right? It's easy to want to do it, but living it out, there's always this push-pull. And it's hard sometimes to figure out, even on both sides, what accompaniment really means. But it's always at the background of what we do in partnership. So that's always that's a starting point for thinking about global partnerships. The other thing is the Global Mission Division of the ELCA has a companion synod program. So they have this long document where they match up a synod in the United States with a church in a different country, or a synod in a different country, which prevents like 3/4 of the churches in the United States partnering with Tanzania and nobody partnering with Namibia. So it tries to equalize the partnerships and extend relationship and community building. So our two partners that have been designated for our synod in the Greater Milwaukee Synod are Tanzania and El Salvador. And most synods have an African and a Latin American partnership, and there are a few Indonesian countries that are also involved in partnerships. I do have the extensive list from the ELCA of the global partnerships, and I highlighted how many are Tanzania and how many are El Salvador, because we are not the only partner synod of those countries. In Tanzania especially, it's a huge church. There are many dioceses, many large churches, so there are many opportunities for partnerships and relationships. In El Salvador, the church is tiny. It's a building, and it's set in small, mostly rural communities that are very poor. So it's a tiny church. The whole country is about the size of Wisconsin. They call it El Pulgarcito, which means the thumb of Central America, because it's so small. But it still has multiple companion synods. It has 4, including us, just to make sure that everybody has equal access. So if anyone's interested, I do have copies I'll put up here. And we do have then 2 synods that we partner with, Tanzania and El Salvador. And we first got involved, maybe some of you remember this, when Pastor Elias was at this congregation serving as a missionary to us. So that was even then trying to turn the concept of missionary on its head. So he was a missionary to us, and I think those of us who know him can agree that he served extremely well as a missionary in terms of bringing spiritual and cultural enrichment to all of us. So it was through him that we developed that first partnership relationship in Tanzania. In 2005, I believe, was the first congregation trip. I think it was 2005. And then a couple of years, were you on the first one, Nancy? Mm-hmm. Okay. So a couple of years later, there were a few people in the congregation, Mark Peterson and Bruce Johnson, who were really interested in starting a relationship with a Central American country. So we did an exploratory trip to El Salvador. They went in 2007, and then a little bit bigger group that Kari and I were part of went in January of 2008. So that partnership has been fully vested since then. So that's just a little bit of background. Any questions on any of that? Or comments? All right, so I am going to turn it over now to Pat Gardner and Darla Hyam, who have been on several of the recent trips to Tanzania. We haven't gone for
2017.
3 years, 4 years. 2017 was that? So, COVID. So Pat and Darla, we're going to tell you about Tanzania.
First thing I want to point out, and this is a perfect example of accompaniment, it's the Tanzanian Cross, where we have God's hand coming down to us, our hands in praise going up, and our hands going out to each other. And it's a symbol that I found very powerful when I was in Tanzania. I have it in my house, and it tells the story of Tanzania very well. The Milwaukee Synod's partnership with Tanzania, with Meru, is now 25 years old. So they're celebrating their 25th anniversary this year, which is pretty amazing for the number of churches that have participated and our number of partners over in Tanzania. When you first get to Tanzania, it is a country of great beauty, great interest when you get to all of the natural wonders, and absolutely amazing people. And their interest is not to be talked to, but they want to talk with us. I think some of the most exciting conversations we had were when we were in people's homes and staying in their homes. They live out their religious convictions. They are a highly religious country. There are more Lutherans in Tanzania than there are in the United States. And it is the second largest religion in Tanzania, following the Roman Catholics. And they are growing by leaps and bounds. We have churches growing. They have what they call preaching points, which is a little place where one of the evangelists will go out and preach. And we were talking in our committee meeting the other day about trying to get a hold of all of the different churches and preaching points, and it's like they just explode on us. It's really, really amazing. Some of the dichotomies in Tanzania is that if you go for a safari, you think, oh, this is a very pretty, very modern, oh, this is just a fine country. You know, electricity's a little bit sketchy, but no problem. If you go to the cities, you got access to a lot of stuff. If you go into the rural and non-urbanized areas, it is self-sufficient. If you want a chair, the guy down the road makes the chair. If you want to get chickens, you'll trade your milk for somebody who's got chicken. It is just an amazing situation, but it also is totally dependent on weather. And if the weather is bad, there's no crops, there's no trading, there's hunger, there's starvation. But even with all of that conversation, when we were over there, we were talking to the people at Sing'isi, our partners, and with the diocese, we go, okay, what's your number one priority? I mean, you've got all of these different needs, and everybody's shouting out that we like this, we want this, da da da. And it's what's your top priority? And it always comes down to education. And again, in education, there's a big dichotomy. If you are wealthy, if you're in an urban area, if you are male, you have a lot of access to education. If you're poor in a rural area or female, yeah, not so much. And while the government provides the first 7 years of education for free, it's not free for the poor people, because you have to have uniforms, you have to have books, you have to have school supplies, and that makes it prohibitive for some of the children. Another problem is that primary education in Tanzania is taught in Kiswahili. If you want to go on, it's all taught in English. So unless you're taught English in your primary school, which often doesn't happen in some of the rural ones, you can't go on at that point. They also have a strict testing system. After your first 7 years, you have to pass your test in order to get to the next lower secondary, as they call it. And when you get done with your lower secondary, you have to pass your test. And at that point, you can go to the upper secondary or to vocational. If you're in upper secondary and you want to go up into the tertiary or the university level, you have to pass the test, and you get one shot. So these kids spend a lot of time studying on how to advance themselves in order to pass their exams, in order to go on and become the doctors or the scientists or the other professions that they're interested in going into. So who provides the education? Primary is government provided, but it's lower quality, it's still expensive. After that, it is the religious organizations or the NGOs that provide a lot of the education in Tanzania. Meru Diocese itself has 12 schools, including a preschool and English primary school, 8 secondary schools, including a seminary prep, 2 technical colleges, and 1 technical college and rehabilitation school for people with mental and physical disabilities. Unfortunately, the pastor that had been running that program just recently passed away. Very young man, very tragic, and I mean, he was so committed to the school. The challenges that are facing Tanzania, first one, of course, is money. They are so far behind in teacher salaries right now. We had an estimate the other day that it's probably $350,000 to $500,000, not T-shillings, dollars that they are behind in salaries. And again, when there are crop failures, no one can barter any longer. So our involvement has been, we provide scholarship dollars to Sing'isi so that they can take it and give it to their students who are going on. Some of the other things we have done is we've given cows out. I know that was one of the goals of one of the first mission trips, is what we gave cows. We give cows, go to one family. The rule is then the first offspring of that cow goes back to the church, and the church decides where it goes. The second offspring you can give it to a family member or a neighbor or a friend, but you cannot keep it. The third one is the first one that you can keep. And it's pretty amazing. But of course, with cows comes methane. There comes manure. And we were involved with a methane project, which is pretty amazing, where they process the manure into methane gas. They pipe it into a cooking chamber, and they have what they refer to as instant heat, instant cooking. You know, for us, instant cooking is throwing it in the microwave, but theirs is the fact that they can turn on a dial and have heat. They do milk processing and make yogurt. And finally, the Synods Partnership Committee has an arrangement with Hope Seed, which first was giving out goats to people in Tanzania, and then following up, they're doing women's enterprises. So what is needed and what can you do to help? And they would all say right now is pray. Pray for us. Pray that we have the ability to educate our children, that we have good crops, that we are successful in building the relationships. Of course, cash is always useful. When we get back to the point that we can go back to Tanzania, there are donations that we can collect and take along. I think we took like 7 suitcases filled with things last time. We had medical supplies, we took used laptops, we had school supplies. I found out taking little LED light flashlights are not only good while we're there, but they're great to leave with the families afterwards, because it provides them light versus just having kerosene lamps. And the final one is the family I stayed with, and we were talking. Elijah was involved with the milk processing and making yogurt. And he goes, I want to learn how to make cheese. And I said, well, I've got a cousin who's a master cheesemaker, but he makes cheese by the thousands of pounds. And we're talking like little small batch cheeses. If anybody knows how to make cheese, get in touch with me, because I'd love to learn, so I could go back over and say, okay, here's how we start making cheese. But those are things that we can do to help. But again, number one is your prayers and your thoughts for Tanzania, because that's what they ask for the most. And that will take care of the medical.
Good morning, or for those of you who've been to Tanzania, habari asubuhi. I've got this up just to keep me honest, and anybody who's been there before can help me do that. I just want to share with you that there actually is a partnership with Meru website, and it is literally partnerswithmeru.org. So you can check out what the Synod is doing. That website's only a few months old and is live through the partnership committee, so it's a nice little resource. And I think the most visible thing we do is the coffee project, but the other two that we do really primarily is the education piece and medical. So I'm going to speak a little bit quickly on the medical piece. Lynn Hooper from, I think it's Redeemer in Racine, is leaving for Tanzania again. She's there pretty much every year as a nurse by training, and there's a lot of support for them. Just to kind of give you a background of what's available for medical care in Tanzania, there is pretty much full academic type medical care in Dar es Salaam. Dar es Salaam is about a 6-hour bus ride from Sing'isi, and that would be where you'd have to go for any real high-level care up until pretty recently. The next closest hospital is essentially at the foot of Kilimanjaro in Moshi, which is Kilimanjaro Lutheran Medical Center. There's a lot of U.S. support there. Duke University has a partnership with there, and there's the Foundation for Cancer Care in Tanzania that's run out of Minnesota. Dr. Mark Jacobson is from Minnesota, was a missionary to the ELCA in Tanzania for about 25 years and just passed away this week. He was probably the principal founder of Arusha Lutheran Medical Center, which is much smaller but very close to Sing'isi. For patients who need cancer care, really Kilimanjaro Lutheran Medical Center is probably the closest. It's about a 2-hour, just a little bit less than 2-hour drive from Sing'isi. Most people there are not driving. Most people get around by motorbikes if they have a motorbike, or they're walking. It's very humbling to be on the freeway there, which is a 2-lane road through the middle of the country, and there's everything from a bus to an ox cart literally being pulled by an ox. So very difficult for people. Most of them are walking to get their medical care, and that's where the synod really comes in. So we've got 2 hospitals that are supported there. Ankaranga is a hospital that we've been to several times, that's supported by the synod, and then there's a smaller, really outpost clinic in Lekramuni where there's one provider there, and their providers generally have a year of training. They've gone to medical school in Tanzania. Some of them go, there's certainly a strong German history there. Some of them go to Germany for training. The smaller clinic in the outpost is really almost kind of a nurse practitioner level, and they're providing all the care that they can. It's incredibly humbling to see what they're able to provide with the resources that they have. Ankaranga is a little bit larger. It's about a 70-bed facility. They do surgery there. Again, it's amazingly humbling. So I'm just going to tell you the projects that we've done at Ankaranga, so you realize kind of what the finances that we do support. Replacing X-ray equipment, and Dr. Frank, who we stay with, who's a dentist, is also the radiologist there. So Dr. Frank is running the X-ray room, so we've helped them with that. Digging a well for clean water. Contributions for unpaid salaries for nurses, so like the education piece, many of the nurses there hadn't been paid for over a year. Providing funds for medication and staff education there, and then actually providing funds for a hospital administrator. The last time we were there, one of the things that they needed most was a transformer. So they get power through the government, and that transformer would typically go out like once a day. So imagine being in the middle of an OR case and losing power. That's the reality for them. A well, and very, very basic needs just to basically run the facility. It's very humbling to see their birth center. They do have a C-section suite there, and they do have a labor and delivery area, and their baby warmer is essentially a wood crate with a heat lamp. So it's kind of like what's keeping the food warm in a fast food restaurant here. It's very functional. It was made by people who came over as missionaries there. So they really provide the best care they can in the environment, and I think without our support, people would literally have to walk to Kilimanjaro. Potentially there's some higher level of care at Arusha, but Kilimanjaro would be the closest place if you needed really serious care. That's an academic site that's probably about the size of Freighter. The Foundation for Cancer Care in Tanzania has built an oncology center there with an infusion. They're completing a radiation facility there now. There's a residential hospice there, and they're building an actual, essentially, version of the Ronald McDonald House. So for people who do need to go there for care, they can stay with their family member for a period of time. It costs about $300 for the complete course of care to treat a child there with Burkitt's lymphoma. Burkitt's is incredibly treatable. But again, people would have to really walk there. Family would have to stay with the child. So over the past probably 5 or 10 years, we've really come a long way in trying to meet the Tanzanians where they are and provide care locally. But they definitely need our support for some very basic things. The Ankaranga Hospital is pretty close to where Bishop Katoy lives. And again, they are still kind of we just are working to keep the lights on, the staff paid, and provide very basic care. When we go, a suitcase, 50 pounds, will basically take probably a month's worth of antibiotics for them. So when we go, we do try and take as much as we can and support them in any way we can. Like Darla said, they certainly need prayers, but they also can take whatever financial support we can give them to keep providing care locally to the residents and members of Sing'isi in particular. We did an eyeglass project there the first time we were there, where we actually made eyeglasses kind of on the fly for them, about 200 pair. Realized it's probably better to take a suitcase full of readers, but that went pretty well, and most of the people who came to get them walked. So kind of gives you an idea of what they're doing to get their care there. Any questions, Darla, I can answer? Thank you.
Dave? Dave's going to talk about the coffee project too.
So how much time do I get, Gretchen? A half hour? Hi, everybody. Just sort of a reminder that we have our Mount Meru coffee, and that of course ties in with Mount Meru that you've been talking about here, which is in Tanzania. I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but where it is exactly. It's in the northeast corner, I believe, of the country there. Anyway, right now, of course, we always have our standard coffee, which is always available in regular and drip, and that's for 12 ounces for $10. And then we're featuring today a peaberry coffee. We were supposed to sample it, but we miscommunicated, and we're sampling a flavored coffee right now. But anyway, this peaberry coffee is coffee brewed from a berry that has only one bean in. So it's a little richer, it's less acidic, and a very good premium coffee. And then the flavored coffees will come in the regular size, and then the sample pack, which we have, that has all 4 flavors and a peaberry and a regular coffee. So we have all kinds of coffee. You'll see it around here. The coffee cart will either be out here or in the regular commons area for sale, and it's even out there during the week should you come during the week to attend anything. So we of course appreciate your sales. Sales were a little slow, of course, when things were slowed down here or we weren't in church, so they need to make up a lot of sales. So anyway, appreciate your patronizing the Mount Meru program, and hope to see you around there soon with your wallet or purse out. Okay, thanks.
You kept it down for half an hour.
Yes, right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we did, yeah. Before we move from Tanzania, we do have a video. I just want to say a word about relationships, since that's so central to partnerships. That is one of the more challenging things when we're not there face-to-face or they're not here face-to-face. So we do try to keep in contact through Facebook. Benson Palangio, who some of you may remember, he visited here one year. He's a very good communicator, also has video skills. So we did ask him to make a greetings video from some people at Sing'isi, and it's basically the partnership committee and the pastor, and it's kind of long, and it gets a little bit detailed, so we're just going to show you like the first 30 seconds of it, so you can get a sense of who they are.
My name is Pastor Elisha William Bese. I'm pastor in charge at the Sing'isi Lutheran Church at Last of May. Many greetings from Sing'isi. We thank God for this grace. I'm here with some partnership committee members, and they are all greetings you in the name of Jesus Christ. Since we started our partnership with you, we benefit a lot. In scholarship, more than 36 students have benefited a lot. Most of those students are now employed, and the others are employed themselves. Also, one of those students, called Omen Kimoto, was employed in our Children and Youth Center, which is known as the Compassion Center, as an accountant. But now, he has gone for further studies. Right now, we have 31 students who are still at the schools, colleges.
So she goes on for about 3 minutes, kind of enumerating each student, and we may put this up on Facebook so that people can watch it when you have time. But just in the interest of time, we thought we showed you the part that gives you the biggest understanding. Their partnership committee is extremely intentional. They take their jobs very seriously. They meet regularly. And all decisions are made through the partnership committee, how they handle our scholarship money. That whole process was determined by them. We send them whatever we collect annually, and then they have an application process for it, and it is only for secondary education. So it really is a lifeline for people who wouldn't be able to go to school if they didn't have any kind of financial support. As Darla explained, it gets more expensive the higher the level gets. So that, I think that is all we have for Tanzania at this point. And we'll move on to El Salvador. And in some ways they're similar, in some ways they're a great contrast. El Salvador, as I said before, is a very small country. If you go to San Salvador, it also has modern conveniences, like you could find in some of the bigger cities in Tanzania. But the country as a whole is quite a poor country. And when you go to the countryside, you really see that access to water is a big issue for a lot of people in El Salvador. It's been an issue for years. The first year we went, the church was involved in demonstrating for water rights. What happens is companies like Coca-Cola and other large companies use an amazing amount of water, which takes it away from people, and then much of the water sources are privatized. So people in the communities have to walk to get it, or their children end up drinking dirty water from rivers, etc. So the church in El Salvador is very involved in some of those what we might consider political issues, because they see them as affecting human rights of their congregants. So that's I would say a pretty big difference between the church in El Salvador and the church in Tanzania. So we are partnered with 2 places in El Salvador. We're partnered with Casa Esperanza, which is a homeless shelter, a daytime homeless shelter that serves a hot meal in the middle of the day. It allows mostly men, there are some women who come, but mostly it's men from the streets, to wash their clothes, to take a shower. They have an Alcoholics Anonymous program. They have a spiritual component to it. When they get lunch, there's usually a little sermon and prayer service. They have limited medical interventions. They do have a small clinic that meets. They have a medicine shelf that gives out basic headache meds, that kind of stuff. And they have done vaccination clinics this year during COVID. So it operates on a shoestring, literally. It's not like they get corporate sponsors like, say, Repairers of the Breach or Guest House or places like that might get here. People of the street, as they call them, there's not societally a ton of compassion for them. They're kind of just cast aside. They really are the lowest of the low in society. So that ministry always touched our hearts, because it is really ministering to people who would be forgotten otherwise. So we provide we send them about $7,000 a year undesignated, just to help with daily expenses. And then every now and then there will be another specific project they ask for support on, and we will often just fundraise among the congregation and send whatever we raise for those funds to. So that is one partnership. That's our longest standing partnership. After our first partnership with Casa Concordia ended, we spent some time looking at trying to connect with another congregation. And we formally entered a partnership with the congregation of Vida about 3 years ago. And time has warped because of COVID. So about 3 years ago, I think it was 3-4 years ago. And it's a small congregation, a young congregation. It's in the mountains it's only about a half hour from San Salvador. And it is pastored by the same pastor who is now one of the administrators of Casa Esperanza. So we felt like that was a good way for us to partner as well. So we do have a little bit longer video from Vida. We're going to show the whole thing. And I'm going to let the Spanish speaker here introduce it and then tell you what happened in the video and a little bit more about Vida. This is my daughter, Kari Stein, for those of you who don't know her. She's been on most of our El Salvador trips, and she's translated on many of them.
Hi. So we're going to show you the video. You're going to see right away Pastor Emily, who is like
an extremely impressive person. Like, she's just very powerful in how she speaks and how she acts. And then you'll see a song and also just members of the congregation.
Queridos hermanos y hermanas de la Iglesia de San Mateo, en este mes del amor y la amistad, agradecemos a Dios tener esta oportunidad de conocerlas, de poder compartir con ustedes, de poder caminar juntas y juntos, de demostrar el amor que Dios nos da hacia cada uno de nuestros hermanos. Con el amor, con la solidaridad de ustedes, fortalecen la fe, fortalecen la esperanza y fortalecen la vida en todo este grupo de hermanos y hermanas que conformamos la Iglesia Luterana de Pan de Vida, Kayaki.
So what she was saying, in this, the month of love and friendship, which is like Valentine's Day, and a lot of times instead of saying St. Valentine's Day in Spanish, you say like the day of love and friendship. So she's saying, in this month of love and friendship, brothers and sisters, let us strengthen our partnership together, and let us strengthen ourselves in solidarity and faith. And she said something else that I forgot. Sorry. Oh, and she was saying, like, and we're going to strengthen ourselves as the people who make up this congregation of Pan de Vida, which means bread of life. And I believe they're going to sing now.
Hermanos y hermanas que conformamos la Iglesia Luterana de Pan de Vida, Kayaki. Este canto amigo a quien lo pudiera necesitar. Yo quiero tener 1,000,000 de amigos y así más fuerte poder cantar. Yo quiero tener la paz del futuro, quiero tener un hogar seguro, quiero a mi hijo pisando firme, cantando alto, sonriendo libre. Yo quiero amor siempre en esta vida, sentir calor y una mano amiga. Quiero a mi hermano sobresaliendo, verlo llorar, pero de contento. Vengan conmigo a ver los campos, canten conmigo también mi canto, pero no quiero cantar solito, yo quiero un coro de pajaritos, quiero llevar este canto amigo a quien lo pudiera necesitar. Yo quiero tener 1,000,000 de amigos y así más fuerte poder cantar.
So that song is I Want to Have a Million Friends, and it's talking about how they want to have a million friends to like share this idea of friendship and love with others, and they're saying, I wish that I had a million friends so that we could sing this chorus even stronger in order to share the message with other people.
Yo quiero tener.
And then these are just pictures of people who are members of the congregation and what their worship service looks like. This is right where their worship services take place in the church.
Esperamos en Dios que ese caminar que estamos iniciando con ustedes sea bendecido, que sea multiplicado.
So she's saying we hope through God that this path that we are starting with you will be blessed.
Que haya muchos hermanos, muchas hermanas que se unan para dar seguimiento al plan de la salvación de Dios.
She said, we hope that there are many brothers and sisters who will join us in this path in order to give salvation through God.
Y nosotros unidos somos el cuerpo de Cristo y estamos llamadas y llamados a demostrar ese amor de Dios hacia nuestro hermano. Él es nuestro amigo.
And she said, we together are the blessed people of God, and we are chosen to spread this love of God with others.
Fiel, y todas y todos somos amigos y hermanos. Saludos.
And she said, we are all brothers and sisters in Christ. And then she just said, like, greetings. And then this says right here, the white one, it says, to our friends from St. Matthew's, we greet you and hug you in this month of love and friendship. So just talking a little bit about Pan de Vida, like my mom said, she was also running part of the people who are running the shelter for people without homes. And so she just has like a very powerful message of like wanting to empower her people and care for her people. And it's a really active church in the community. For example, during the pandemic when people weren't able to go to school, she was like having people come to the church in order to complete their assignments and do their tests, and like using her personal internet and I believe her phone so that the kids could make sure they completed their studies. And then she's also a nurse by training, so she has a lot of projects that include like medical support and just education around different medical needs and around sexuality and sexual health in the community. So she's, the whole community is just very involved in making sure they provide in many different ways. Like not, I think a lot of times here we think about church and we think about going on Sundays and just the faith aspect of it, and it's very much like a walking faith as a part of the community. And when I was there, which was, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, 4 years ago, it's hard to know.
Sometime before COVID.
Yeah, we did just have a chance to walk around the whole community, which is really, really beautiful. It's in the mountains, and so you like walk up and down a lot, which is really pretty, and visit a lot of different families and just kind of see the connection that she had with people in the church and they had with each other. So it's a really, really cool community that's like very much involved in being and doing the work, which is cool. I don't know what else to say.
So, Kari did mention the fact that Emily was a nurse and that she does a lot of medical education in the community. And one of the focuses is on sexuality, and she's very frank about it, both at Casa Esperanza and at in Pan de Vida. And with Casa Esperanza, it's for the men to be responsible and healthy. And for in the communities, it's tied up with education and opportunity, and she's trying to prevent early pregnancies and male responsibility and that kind of thing. So she is just very, very, very open and frank about it in a way that you wouldn't see us being in most churches in this country. But she's very, very committed to the youth and the young people. Many churches in El Salvador are quite young. They're often dominated by women because many men in El Salvador come to this country or have in previous years come to this country and work here and send money home. So that takes men away from the community. But she does have a very active group of people who are kind of her church council. When we were there a couple of years ago, this may have been the last time we were there in January 2020, we brought balloons. And you know the balloon bounce game, like the simplest game in the world, and the kids love it. We decided to play that in the Salvadoran church with the kids. And at first they were kind of shy, and then they started playing. And before we knew it, these ladies who had been sitting there for the entire service with no smile on their face were in the middle of the room, bouncing balloons, laughing, just having a great time. And it was just one of those like awesome moments of partnership where you see how a thing like that can break down reservations. But it's a wonderful church to have a relationship with. Pastor Emily is very, very responsive, better than I am, because I respond to her in Spanish and I think, oh good, that's done, and then she responds right away, and I'm like, oh, I gotta write another Spanish email, and it gets a little bit truncated that way. But she's very, very open to communication. I asked her to do this, and she obviously put a lot of work into it in terms of choosing that song about singing with a million voices, and her message is so focused on what partnership is. So it's just a wonderful church to be involved with. And I know a couple people in this room have visited Pan de Vida or Casa Esperanza, so I just wanted to give you a minute to share any strong memories you have of visiting. Also, Don?
Should I go up there?
Yeah. Oops. You can even have the microphone.
Sure. It is a very nice looking town that Pan de Vida's in, with some nice looking homes, etc. But the parishioners of Pan de Vida are not the wealthy people. And correct me if I'm saying anything wrong, but they are the poorest people in town. And there's nice churches in town, wealthy churches. I think probably the biggest one is the Catholic Church, and probably the wealthier people go there. But her church has very poor people. We're visiting people that have next to nothing. And you really get the feeling that she is devoted to these poor people. One more thing I want to say is that I heard, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that the previous minister to this church was assassinated, presumably, I'm guessing, by the gangs.
It was during the war.
It was during the war. Okay, and I asked if she had any fear as a result through, I don't know, what interpreter, and she says no, because God is with me. And that is the feeling I get from this church in El Salvador. These are people who are living in faith, probably more than we are up in America here, because they have less.
Can I just wanted to add, when we're talking about like the poverty in El Salvador, the wealth is really concentrated in like a very, very small percentage of the population. So it's like they say like 14 families who have like most of the wealth, and then it's like everyone else. So just when we're talking about, like, I think sometimes we think about here where you're like, oh, we have all these different classes, just like the way the wealth is distributed there is extremely unequal. So just wanted to share that.
That is true. Also, I think one of the very eye-opening things that I've experienced on partnership trips is how you judge wealth. And you know, we have our idea of what middle class is in this country, right? We would have running water, we'd have plumbing, we'd have enough to eat every day, we'd have some basic, you know, more than basic comforts. You know, we have some discretionary income. And we think of like what our physical surroundings would be as a middle class person. But I have visited in that community, we visited one family, and they had some Quonset hut basically. You know, they get strong rain, so people build the houses with the metal roofs. And they had probably 3 of them. One of them had a kitchen in it, one of them had a TV and a sitting room, one of them had bedrooms, and they had rain barrels. So, you know, they were inventive in that way. They were collecting water. They had all these systems set up, and I thought, to us, that looks like poverty, but I'm not sure it looked like poverty to them. So there are different ways of judging. I mean, there are some people that clearly had not enough to eat and not enough room, but the people who showed us their homes in Pan de Vida were very proud of them. And even we saw a little apartment that was basically 1 room. Very proud of it. So part of it's different expectations, and that's where it's like the vulnerability and being stretched at what can you see that opens your mind a little bit about what your perceptions of the world are. But Curry's right, most of the people in El Salvador are poor, and very few people are wealthy, percentage-wise. Anyone else have a memory to share from a trip that heard?
Yeah, upon returning, I was at the airport in Texas changing planes and had lunch and met two fellows that said they were missionaries leaving El Salvador on their way to India, and they said India was much, much more advanced in their from their perception compared to El Salvador. It was just, they were described as a difference of night and day, and we think of India as being poor, except again for the cities
Right.
on that. But it just struck me where they're leaving there and saying, we're going to a place that's much more advanced.
And it's unequal in El Salvador, and the other thing is, Don had mentioned people being poor. That's intentional with the Lutheran Church. They have intentionally planted themselves in poor, mostly rural communities. They see that as their mission. They have liberation theology is at the core of most Central American churches, where God liberates us here as well as in the afterlife, and that is also an outgrowth of the war, that they were ministering to those populations. So there is still a lot of trauma in that church that's carried over from the war, even though a lot of the young people don't have firsthand memory of it. There is just a lot of trauma that infuses how they do things and how the churches operate. So Don had mentioned the assassination. That happened, I believe it was during the war, the ending years of the war, and it was this terrible thing. Both, it was a pastoral husband and wife team. They were both killed during a church service. But I don't think that danger doesn't exist in the same way that it did then, although the gangs are very powerful. There is a lot of violence associated with the gangs. So it's a little country that has a lot of very big problems, but it's also a beautiful, beautiful country, and people are very proud of it and love to share it. They're very hospitable. Are there any questions about partnerships? So it's hard, one of the challenges is keeping it in front of people when we don't travel there. But it's always there, and we are going to be working on ways now to keep getting more information out. But one thing we are going to be starting with Pan de Vida is a scholarship program. Probably it'll be focused on secondary education as well, but we are going to be working with Pastora Emily to see how she wants to run it and how she wants to administer it. And so you can be watching The Voice for information on that, because we will be looking for people to help provide that gift of education to people. So any other thoughts or questions?
About how many people are in that church?
I don't know. They don't have, I don't think they have membership rules like we do, When we worshiped there, probably the first time we came, when we went that summer, Kari, there were probably 20 people there. Don't you think, when you translate it?
Probably.
But I don't know, when we worshiped there were probably about 20. It's hard to know if those are people who come every week, or if, some of them came for the week that we were there. But yeah, it's really hard to know because they consider themselves a community plant. So, any other questions? Whereas in Tanzania, how many people are involved at Sing'isi and then Kiara?
Oh, geez.
Thousands, right? Yeah, 1,000. Yeah, the churches are huge in Tanzania.
Sing'isi is huge.
How do the people support themselves? Are they on farms or working for others?
In El Salvador?
Yes.
That's a really good question. A lot of people are in the not formal economy, so they might have a cart where they sell pupusas or tortillas or street corn or something like that. There are domestics, people who clean. A lot of people farm. Where our church is, there are coffee plantations, and so people work on those. And then there's people who work in shops. There are people who are paid a salary or a wage, office workers. Very many people are outside of the formal economy.
Pat was showing some cool pictures.
We can run them after.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh,
Your dog?
Pat's got pictures of his dog to share with us. So, oh yeah, let's see the pictures.
These are just some of the photos of Ankaranga Hospital. That's part of the Senate-supported hospital that's right outside of Bishop Katoya's home. So this just gives you an idea of kind of what an operating room there looks like at Ankaranga for the C-section suite. This is essentially, you know, their stock. So when we help supply their pharmacy, it's very meager. Another photo of the operating room. This is kind of the outside view of where patient rooms would be. That's just another, this is essentially their entire pharmacy at Ankaranga with one of the pharmacists and the pharmacy itself. This is their maternity suite prep for someone who has postpartum hemorrhage or somebody who has eclampsia. That's the entirety of it. That's a baby warmer I was speaking to that some German missionaries made for them for kind of their neonatal unit, and that's the birthing suite that they have at Ankaranga with a typical patient room here. So it's an outdoor facility. These are some of the medications that we took them last time. This is, when I said that the Synod supported a hospital administrator, this is a missionary administrator who was there for about 5 years that the Synod helped support. So it kind of gives you an idea of what the hospital itself is like. They're still definitely using paper records. And it's interesting to see patients outside. It's open air, and you'd see somebody walking, you know, with an open wound. There's a lot of orthopedic injuries in Tanzania. Motorbikes have become the mode of transportation, so there's a lot of orthopedic repair or just outright amputations. In one of the places we went to at the rehab center, they make an awful lot of prosthesis there for people of.
And we brought a bone saw at their request.
Yes,
We did. Yeah, so that's one of their biggest challenges, particularly in the smaller areas. So those are the types of injuries that they're dealing with at Ankaranga.
Two pictures of the one out in the side, here on the side.
I don't have liquor money I do from 2014, but it'll take me a while to find it.
All right, so just to close it, we don't know when we're going back. We hope soon. COVID is pretty bad right now in El Salvador. The information I get is that because of the way they do testing, the numbers are probably grossly underrepresented. So I wouldn't feel safe planning a trip for next November or next January at this time. I mean, I would wait until closer to see how things look, just like with almost everything right now. So we will get back sometime. We will get back to Tanzania sometime, but we don't know when. So.
What is the COVID situation in Tanzania? I've been looking on the internet and not finding too much that's very specific.
They had a policy of not reporting a great deal of it.
That's what I was sensing when I was trying to research it.
It's better than it was. We've had a couple meetings for the education committee with them over the past live meetings over the past month, and it's definitely improving.
I thought at one point Bishop Elias was saying how they were like miraculously spared in their area, but this was some time ago.
Yeah, I think part of that is just that they weren't reporting anything, so there's truly no idea of how many people actually had COVID there.
What I heard from El Salvador is that they have a specific number of tests that they administer every day. So the number is never going to go above that number of tests. In addition to that, the only results that they count are the PCR tests, and most people in that country can't afford to pay for a PCR test. So there are probably a number of people who either aren't testing and are sick, or who are testing using antigen test, and it's not getting recorded. So that's why they feel the numbers are vastly undercounted. The government has had a pretty strong response, though, in terms of masks and distancing, and maybe a little bit it's authoritarian, but it did seem to have helped slow the spread initially. So it wasn't news that I felt like would make me feel like you should take a delegation there. Although there have been 2 delegations from Milwaukee down in the past month to do missions of healing, and they just did most of their work outside and also wore masks and were very careful. So Anyway, any other questions? Well, thank you so much for coming and for listening, and if you want to look at any of the pictures or the list of partners or have any questions for us, feel free to ask. Thank you.